So this week we will continue Daf Chav Gimel, and we'll start Chav Gimel at Aleph at Ois Gimel of the Mimer of the beer L'Havini Natam, a beer on Weraina. And at this point, he was speaking the difference between the levels that are higher, the chitzonius of the higher level, which comes down as the Galgalta, as the skull, the levels that are Pnimiyim, the inner levels, they come down in the level of Moichin, and the Moichin, the intellect, they are able to not go as low, and also they need garments because they have to be in an inner and a way that we could comprehend and understand and appreciate. On the other hand, the level of the skull, the level of chitzonius, is beyond those types of vessels or organs, etc., and therefore it's outside of the levushin, etc. And so here he goes in Ois Gimel, which on Daf Chav Gimel. It says, but this will understand the idea of tza'enu and go out and see. He says that the pleasure of neshamas that are in Gan Eden, they are from the comprehending of the secrets of Torah that they were involved in this world when they were in the world, physical world, in the nigla, in the revealed levels of Torah, Gemara, halacha, etc., which the source of this light from the level of the hidden chachma stima, is an inner level, and it comes down in many evolved levels until it gets revealed to the neshama in Gan Eden in an inner level, mamash. What does it mean inner level? That it gets appreciated. Like food, we eat it, gets digested, which they could understand it and they have pleasure from it. And therefore, the neshama in Gan Eden cannot have this pleasure, and it cannot comprehend this from the inner levels of this pleasure and this inner intellect, if not for garments that it has that come from the halachas and the mitzvahs that it was involved in this world. And that's what it needs to be able to appreciate these inner levels. In a simpler vein, if you want to understand the deeper idea, you have to have language to understand it. You need vessels to be able to comprehend it and appreciate it. But therefore, when it comes to the crown that his mother has crowned him with, on this it says, "Tza'enu re'ena," go out of these garments, because these garments don't help for the level of the Torah, for the level of the crown. And he goes now in the bracket, meaning to say, even though that the skull is higher than the hidden wisdom, because it is the level of Keser, the crown of the level of Arich, but yet because it's the external level, therefore it's able to descend and be revealed down here without a garment, or on a lower level without a garment. On the other hand, the inner levels, as it's known, that the external levels of the supernal one, of the higher one, could go further down. And even though it is only the external of the supernal, the higher level, but yet, because the one who is higher is able to load down even lower, and therefore can be revealed even in lower of places, which is through its external levels. And this is similar to what it says and explained in other places. In what it says, Keil Elyon Gemel Chasadim Tovim, that to be able to have the Gemel, the giving over of great kindness, which Shir says is the levels of Netzach, Chod, and Yesod, which those are the levels. Those three attributes are the givers. Where does it come from? Keil Elyon, from an even higher, from God who is exalted even higher. In other words, its source is from the crown, and that is because the levels of Netzach, Chod, Yesod, they are the external levels of the Mashpia, which they descend and get revealed to the receiver. And the power of this descent comes from the crown, which is higher than the wisdom itself, higher than Chachma. And look in this, what it explains in other places, in the explanation of Moshe Yedaber, in the idea of the three worlds that come from the original Tikkun. Look there. And therefore, to be able to have Re'ena, that you should be able to see in the crown, you don't need the garments, because it's beyond the garments. And it gets revealed down here without the garments, because it's from an external level. And now he continues in the bracket. As you could realize, I'm going slower than I usually go, because these two oisias that we're doing is a lot of Haggas, and it's a little bit confusing and so I'm just slowing it down so that we could go through it in a more easy way. He says, and I'm not going through the details, I'm just the overview as we is in the mimer, just reading it, but trying to go a little bit slower so we can understand it as you read along. He says, and another explanation, and this is the main one, that the idea ure'ena, to see, is similar to what is explained on the pasuk chachlili einayim, in the idea that the level of the za, it gazes on the forehead of Arachampin. Okay, so he explains. The idea of seeing in general is external. On the other hand, all the other powers, like the power of wisdom or the power of the emotions, in other words, as follows. Emotions are feelings inside of you. Even your wisdom are things inside of you, your thinking. Even your nose, you smell things that come inside of you. Your mouth, you're speaking or you're eating things that come inside of you. On the other hand, when it comes to your eyes, they're very external. They see specifically things outside of you. And they never come within you. And there's no way for them to come within you. And therefore he calls it a level of chitzonius. And the idea here is that to be able to look at the forehead of Arachampin, which through this you're able to receive the 370 lights that come from the level of Arachampin, it's not possible to be done except through the eyes, which is the level of sight from the outside. In other words, not the sight of wisdom, which is an inner type of sight. So wisdom, rather specifically physical sight that's external, which it doesn't come into your face. Specifically through that, you could look at the forehead of Arachampin. And even though he says that eyes in general also from the level of wisdom, because we know that sight and wisdom are synonymous, or they're connected, as it says, that the rabbis, the chachamim, are called the eyes of the nation. So he says it's true, but the eyes are from the levels of netzach and hoid, which is in chachma. It is from the levels of netzach and hoid that are in the levels, it's external, as we learned before, like the feet that go out, more of an external level of the wisdom, which encloses itself within physicality and in physical things. On the other hand, the power of the wisdom itself, which is the chabad, the chachma bin adas that's in the wisdom, is an internal level. And therefore, to be able to be revealed within the level of Zah, which is Erampin as it is in Atzilus, from the levels of the forehead, which is the end of the level of the crown of Arach, you cannot have this revelation in an inner, pnimius way, in your chachma bin adas of Zah, in the intellect of Zah, only in the level of eyes that you could look. You could look in an external way. And the same way we'll understand here now this idea of you should see in the crown, that this revelation is not like the revelation that happens from supernal wisdom that is able to be drawn down in an intellect and understanding for the neshamis that are in the Gan Eden, in their intellect, in their chachma bin adas, their wisdom and understanding. And therefore, because they need to come it down in understanding in Gan Eden, they need to have garments. But the revelation that becomes that comes from this level of the, so to speak, arich, the keser of arich, that cannot that cannot be appreciated and enjoyed in an intellectually grasping way, because it's higher than the power of our intellect, of our ability to grasp it. Only the revelation is in a way of ure'ena that we see it. In the crown, in a way of just sight, like we said before, that the Zah, the Naim of Zah, the eyes of Zah, could look at the forehead, at the skull of Arach. But therefore, you don't need a garment. You don't need garments in this situation. Okay, and look also what it explains in the idea of staring, gazing, and looking in the Maimer V'eschan el Hashem, in the explanation of the Eretz Ha'aretz, I'll see the land. And now, here comes another answer in this whole thing. V'oid yesh lemer, we could say another explanation. That this is too similar to what it says in the explained other places in the three levels of food, garments, and home. That we say there's mazain, there's levbush, there's garments, and there's a house, which they are the levels of number one, food being mamala kalaman, the light that fills the world. It's also connected with Torah, that which comes internally within us and we grasp and understand, or we see the divisions from one thing to another in everything that's created in the world, which is called Mamala. Then there's Soiv Kalam, and how all things are like one. We see all the things of the world and everything in a vision, in a way that it's all united, it's all equal. And in that we talk the general level of mitzvahs. And then you have that which is higher than Soiv Kalam, which is not less. So Soiv Kalam is the level of garment. And there's what's higher than the garment, higher than Soiv Kalam, which is called the bayis, the house. It's the same way in a person. We have the level of mazain, which is the level of food, which is inner light, which is the level of Torah. And it says that you should then we have the garments, which they happen from the actions of mitzvahs. And through these garments, you're able to have afterwards a appreciation and enjoyment and receive a light from the level of the supernal garments of the Eibishter, which is a level of soivev. But then there's the level of the crown that was crowned, etc. That is which is higher than soivev, and therefore it's even higher than the level of garments, which is the garment of kingship of Hashem. Rather, it is the crown of the kingship, which is the makif of the makif, the surrounding level of the surrounding levels, like the house. And being that it is higher than the source of garments, therefore it's not possible to see it. You're not able to see this crown through the garments. And therefore it says, go out from the garments and see and go gaze upon the crown. Okay. And so that was 3 explanations on why we see, and the sight is specifically without the understanding and therefore doesn't need the garments. 3 explanations. Now he says, we could also say that the meaning of Tza'ena, of going out, is similar to what it explains. In other places, on the meaning that the Jewish people left Mitzrayim with an outstretched hand, which means they go out of their vessels and out of their limitations, and that is the idea of uplifting of the soul to fulfill that which it says, Eilecha Hashem nafshi yesa, that to you Hashem I uplift my soul, and this is the level of the higher level, the supernal tshuva, which is higher than all garments that happen through the doing of mitzvahs, as it's known. And look at what it says in the end of the Maimar Adula Yada, and also the Maimar Kartzi Simcha, and at the Maimar Shmaim Kisi about the idea of Bayis Asher Tivnuli, which in the Maimar is Bayis Asher Tivnuli is that through the idea of a bittul, of you able to go beyond Torah and beyond mitzvahs, and it's the idea of that the Eibusher sees the one who's broken, which that's the idea of tshuva, that through tshuva we could achieve and we could see beyond even what could only be accomplished in a garment, which is regular mitzvahs or Torah. He says at this level of the crown and this atara that we said before, that this is specifically what the neshamas draw down through their levels of nullification of their desire and the fulfillment of physical mitzvahs. And on this it says, on the crown that he was crowned on the day that his mother crowned. And as we said before, it says, what does it mean? The mother, we are called the mother in this situation, because this is called the source of souls that is called his mother, the mother, I think, of Zah. And if you look at it, says of Yivul Shmachos. But, so therefore, we as the neshamas, we're the ones who make this crown. Now he says, we're not the ones, that's not the neshamas they make from new crown. Because we said before that the source of this crown is from the level of the skull, of Arachampin, which its source is from the level of the Makif, of Soiv Kolaman. And it's not just coming from the level of Bina, only that the drawing down of the crown, revelation of the crown, that it should actually be crowned upon the head of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. In other words, that's what's dependent on the neshamas, that they draw it down, that there should be given the place, the crown of Malchus on his head. For example, when anyone who leads in the world, that the crown and the Torah that they put on the head of the king of a flesh and blood, when they crown him, that the crown in this Torah is already built from before, and it was already made through whichever handiwork the smiths made it, who know how to make it. Only the idea of crowning him is that they put it on his head. As it says, that the crown should be placed on his head. And the same way also it is about Haman and Achashverosh. He said, you place the crown on Haman's head. Haman wanted it for himself. But it has to be placed on his head. It exists anyway. And the same way, for example, it is above in the idea of, on the crown that was crowned him by his mother, that the Jewish people, they draw down the crown in this kesser, so to speak, from the level of our champin, that it should be drawn down on the 10 spheres of Atzilus, and the 10 spheres of Zah. that it should be crowned upon them. And look what it says in Parshat Midbar, in the explanation in the idea of drawing down Keser to Zah, and also in Shavuos, on the day of Shavuos, that we draw down the level of Keser onto Zah. And look also in Mitish Melech, Bashzachrei, on the idea of the crown that was crowned by his mother, and look there in the name of this in the Sefer Emek HaMelech. Okay, now Ois Dalet. He says, now this is what they said. This is what we say. Umi midbar matana, that the Torah, which is a matana, a gift, comes from where? From the midbar, from a level of desert. And we explained before above that the idea is that even though it says in the pasuk, Zoysa Torah Adam, at the level of Torah is the level of man. As we know that Torah comes from the level of Chachma, that's where it comes out from, which Chachma is already from the level of man. Yet, that's only as it comes out from a concealed state to a revealed state. But its source and its foundation, as it is supernally above from where it was taken, it says there, Umimidbar Matana, that it's a gift from the desert, which a desert is a place that's so high above the level of man, as we know about a desert, that it says that no man has passed there and no man has settled or dwelled there. Which means it is much higher than the level of the supernal man, which is on the throne, which generally refers to the level of the revelation of the 10 spheres as it is in the level of Bria. And from there, it gets drawn down from this level of Midbar Matana, that it becomes a crown on the head and on the intellect. And that's what it says on the crown, that he crowned him on the day, as we said, the Matan Torah, by his mother. And this is what's similar to what it says in the Zohar in the part called Safed Tzniusa, that it says, in that beauty, in that glory, it says that no man has passed, and no man has said, and no man has gone, Lebarhu, except for the Eibishter himself, so to speak. I think that's what it means. Or Lebarhu could be that the Adam is on the outside. I think it means that and somebody will just be fixed one day in this recording. But the bottom line is that it says Lebarhu. And that's what he says in the Zohar Harakia, in the name of the Arizal. And that's what he writes. That what does it mean? Adam, that Adam is in the level of Zah, in the level of Zerampin, but not in Arachampin. And even in Zah itself, it's only called Adam from the level of the nose and below. As it says in Ider Rabbah, Ad Kan L'Shoina. So in Ider Rabbah, there he writes that the level of the forehead of Zah is still from the level of Kiloi Adam, from the level of beyond man. And he says the idea here is that in the involvement of the 10 spheres of Atzilus that comes from the three sides, the three kavim, on the right side there's Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. And on the left side there's Bina, Gvura, and Hoy. And on the middle side, in the middle column, there's Das, Tiferes, and Yisoid. That all this together, all these 9 together, that's what's called the form of man above. And on this it says that on the form, on the, so to speak, the throne, there's a supernal throne, there's a form, so to speak, in the liking of man, in the likeliness of man. In other words, this level of the 10 spheres is revealed on this throne in the world of Bria. On the other hand, the level of crown, which is higher than this division and this evolvement, and it's not of these midas whatsoever. On this it says that he's not a man, and therefore he cannot change. Doesn't change his mind. And look what it says in this another place in Zachar Sema Shabbos. And therefore it says at the level of this mitzvah, this level of the forehead, it is a vessel to the revelation of the supernal desire, which is higher than the level of man. And we'll understand this through example down here of a man. We know that the main form of a face, the main form of a man is from his nose and down. And therefore the rabbi said that you cannot give testimony on a one to recognize a person except if he has the face with the nose. That's what it says in the Mishnah in the end of Mesechta Yevamos. And the idea is because the nose and lower, that is where the light and the life force comes in divided ways of levels, and the way they combine fuse with one another, which that's the main level of man, as we find that there's 2 holes in the nose, and there's 2 eyes, and there's 2 ears, and there's also 2 hands, and there's a body, and there's 2 feet, which these are all vessels to spiritual life forces. Inner spiritual life forces that come in divisions and divided ways from the 10 powers of the soul of Chabad, Chagas, and Ihim, which is the 10 spheres, the 10 powers of the soul. And that's what comes down into these 2 eyes, which they are vessels to the level of the revelation of the level of Chachma. As we know, the Chachamim, the wise people, are called the eyes of the nation. And it gets divided into 2 eyes. There's a right side to the eye and there's a left eye. And the same way there's 2 ears, which is from the level of bina, and also gets divided into 2. And then there's the right side, which is the level of chesed, and the left side in general, which is the left arm, is the level of gvura. And then we have netzach and hoid, which are the 2 thighs, which all of them are divided levels, each one according to be a vessel in its own way to a specific power of the soul. And then in a way of combination, that they all combine and they connect with one another, all these limbs, one with the other, through the different sinews and different veins that we have within our body. And this is all the level of tikkun. Tikkun, we know, is fixed and it's all combined and everything works together. In other words, there's divisions, and at the same time, all the things that are divided are inclusive of one another and they work with one another. And therefore, in this level, there's many, many changes. Sometimes the combination is a way that the kindness is stronger. Sometimes it's the other way around. And the same way in all other powers, and according to the different ways of this combinations in the inner levels of the powers, and the inner pneumistic koiches, that will be the way it will be recognized, this change, in the external form of the face. That sometimes your face will turn red, and sometimes it will turn white. And therefore, specifically on the face, you could see the changes in the form of man. This one different than another. In other words, as we know, no human is made and looks the same as somebody else. And that's all on the face. As you can see in Mishnah, say Perek Sanhedrin. On the other hand, on the level of the forehead, you call Loy Adamhu. That's where it says that's beyond, it's not the nose and lower, it's higher. And there we say, not man beyond man. And now, in a bracket, this is probably Tzemach Tzedek, is now going to go through an inyan and niglo a little bit on this thing. He said, now, even though that in the Brisa of Yevamis, on the Mishnah that we mentioned before, that you need to have a nose to be able to recognize a head, it says there that you have to have parts of panim v'loy padachasem idin. It says if you have a face, but you don't have the forehead, or the other way around, you can't give testimony. In other words, you need all 3. You need the nose, you need the face, and you need the forehead. So we see that the recognition of a person is also dependent on his forehead. And look, and it says, and that's all similar to what he explains. This is like what it says in Tosfos. Tosfos says in Eshper Chesta B'chayris, he says that there's a part of a person that you recognize through it the face, which is the forehead, which is called hakaras pneim, the recognition of the face, that through it and with it you recognize the face. And so from the language of the Tosfos, it sounds like you recognize through it the face, but it's not of the face itself. And he says, therefore, he continues, but for sure, this is not from the actual face. And that's the understanding from Tosfos. So therefore, we could say that you could recognize a face from the forehead, but it's not of the face. Therefore, it's still beyond the face, as we're explaining here from the Zohar. Then he says, Karbana Eda, in Yerushalmi, in Yevamisham, as in the back, he says, Lavdafka Karbana Eda, maybe a different sefer, but there in Yerushalmi, he says that the Mishnah and the Brisa are arguing one with the other. And he leaves this in the Tzarachi, and he says that the Mishnah is holding you only need the nose and you don't need the forehead, and the Brisa holds you also need the forehead. He says, but this is against the Gemara, and we have in Yevamis, because over there he brings that the Brisa has a question on the Mishnah, and it all considered one discussion. And he brings there also a story from Abba Bar Menyumi, which that he went and he changed. He put some wax on his forehead and nobody noticed him, which was proof that you can't notice a face without a forehead. And this is against the Shas and of Bechayris that we have there, and against all the Paskim. Okay, so the Karbana Eda L'chayra is not saying something that works according to Machzedek based on all the other Paskim and the Gemara and the way it's all written. He says, yet there's no contradiction from here to what it says in the Zohar and the Arizal, because the kavanah of the Zohar, the meaning of the Zohar and the Arizal, is it's not part of the form of the face, and therefore it's called Kilei Adamhu. Yet it's possible, and for sure, like Tosfos says, that through it you're able to recognize the face. That's true, it has an impact somehow on the face. But it's not of the face. It's something higher and beyond the face. And so anyway, it continues now on the inside, that this is level of Kilei Adam, that there in the level of the forehead, there's no division into 2 levels, like the 2 eyes that are divided to 2 sides, because that is the forehead, is the vessel to the level of supernal desire, which is higher than wisdom, as it says, that it should be on his forehead at all times, liratzon. This is about the tzitz, by the Aaron HaKohen, that it should be, in other words, it's connected to the level of desire. And this is the level we call Raivin the Chorayvin, the pleasure of all pleasures, which is higher than any type of divisions. Like we say, there's no left side in the level of Atik, and even though that this main level is in the forehead of Arachampin, which is much higher than even Atzilus, yet also in the forehead of Zah, it shines this level, that the level of the forehead is the level of desire, for and similar to the skull that surrounds over the brain. And therefore, at this level, it says still, that he's not a man that changes, and that there's not possible to have changes there as in the level of man, which there are changes. Sometimes the kindness is stronger, and sometimes the other way around. On the other hand, in the level of the forehead and Ratzain, as it says, I am God and I never change, and therefore, also down here in a person, down here in this world, the forehead is always in one level and you don't see any changes in it like you see on the face. And therefore the level of the forehead is called the level of midbar, of a desert, meaning a place that no man has passed, no man has ever settled. In other words, it's higher than the level of Adam, and it's called midbar, a desert. Just like a desert, you cannot plant and you cannot grow things there the same way. You cannot grow and plant things. In other words, you can't have changes of big or small, which is in the forehead. And therefore we find by the forehead that it's empty of all hairs, and hairs do not grow there. Because it's a place where there is no growth. It's beyond growth. And therefore the Torah that comes from the level of Ratzin Elyon, the Torah that is drawn down from the supernal desire, that says in its original source, the pleasure of all pleasures of Arachampin, on this it says, Mumidbar Matana, that it's a gift from where? From the desert. Only it gets revealed ultimately in the level of man, as we said before, and this is probably similar to what we said before, that the level of Meitzach, the level of the forehead, does have an impact somehow, in some way, later on, in the levels of the face as well. And on the third, we will understand in the service of man, in every single soul, which is also called the name of man, is called with the name of man. And it says, we shall make man in our image, in our form, or as it says, you are man. And therefore, just like in the level of supernal man, there's also one level that's called not man. And that is from the level of the forehead and above, as we said before, in the name of the Idra and the Rizal. The same way also is in the Neshamas, that the level of man is a 10 koiches of the godly soul, which the godly soul is made up of 10 spheres. In other words, that is its nullification and its recognition of wisdom and understanding, and its love and fear, and all the other attributes of character traits of midas that are in the heart. That in them, there's changes, many changes. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're more mature, and they're big. And the same thing also in the level of tshuva and a broken heart. Sometimes it's from the depth of the heart, and sometimes the heart is not so broken, and the light of the soul does not burn in it, and doesn't get flamed in it at that time, because of the physicality of the body and its material attachments, that it becomes, so to speak, a veil, a barrier that separates, heaven forbid. And that's, for example, the idea of the changes that happen in the physical face of the form of a man from red to white. And look into Mamarm here, but there's also in the Neshama another level which is higher than the 10 koiches, which the beginning of the 10 koiches is Chachma Bina, which is the higher level, which is the level of nullification and self-sacrifice, in the very essential desire that's higher than any intellect, as it's known that there's a desire and there's a higher level of desire. And as it says in the Maimer, on the Pasuk Yaakov Moshe, and that is that this desire, this Ratzain, its source is from the supernal desire that is higher than intellect, which could be comprehended, and therefore the Jewish people are called Yisrael, which Yisrael is the letters and the words Li Rosh, to me a head. That means that the Rosh, the head, which is the level of the skull, that surrounds and is beyond the intellect, it surrounds on the intellect, on the brain. As we also could see what it says in Parashat Shlach, in Ani Asher Tzeisi Yaschem Eretz Mitzrayim, and look what it says in the Maimer and at this level, there cannot be any changes. As it says that even V'gam Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishakar, the level of Netzach, of the victory, the of Yisrael does not say an untruth, meaning it's always true. It's always one. Why? Because he's not a level of man. And we know the level of Netzach and Meitzach, forehead and Netzach, That's all one level. And look in Sefer Shabbat in Perik Yutas, which there he speaks about, that there's a level of Chacham below, which is one level. Then there's a level of Mesiras Nefesh, that a Jew, even one who has sinned or whatever, he's gone very far, but when he's challenged with something that challenges his very essential bond with Hashem, in a level of a nisayon, of a test of Mesiras Nefesh, he will absolutely give up his life and do what is. Why? Because essentially there's something within him that's unchangeable and beyond any type of intellect. And this level arises above also the level of crown and the surrounding level over Atzilus. In this mimer, we're speaking Bria is the level of the inner levels. Atzilus is more Soiviv. And then we have Arich, which is the Makif of the Makif. And there we know dark and light are equal, and therefore at that level, the sins, and even the sins that are done on purpose, get transformed to actual full merit, because, as we said, there dark is like light, all equal. There's no red and white, and there's no gvura and chesed. It's beyond it all, and therefore everything can be changed there. And with that, we'll finish for this week, and we'll continue the mimer next week.